smiling her liking at him. He finished his cigarette. Then he should have gone back to the party, but he couldn't. It was strange. And they talked for a while about taking the dog and running off to a town in South America, about the boat they would live on and the smugglers they would meet, and the sunsets over the turquoise sea, where blue crabs would scuttle over the beach. And it felt as if they were even younger than they were, as if they didn't yet have jobs. Kate was Hungarian, Turkish, Persian, 3 romantic, impractical strains, 3 peoples who had thrown away their empires. Her ancestors wore jewels in their beards. They galloped on horses, waving swords. With them, it was opium dens or Stalinism, no middle ground. So Kate said, laughing at herself. She was talking obliquely about herself. Ben was half Bengali, half Jewish. That could be interesting, but it was sedate. He came from a line of rabbis, shopkeepers, lawyers. There was a feeling that he might be uncool by comparison, a feeling Ben had to consciously suppress. He said, "My family didn't wave swords, but I'm always willing to try." Both Ben and Kate were tawny, black-eyed, and aquiline. They looked like members of the same indeterminate race. They commented on this likeness, using self-deprecating terms like beige and beaky, and became so happy at this, at nothing, that they started to walk the dog downtown. The dog was beige too, Ben pointed out, and they paused and crouched to compare their arms to the dog's coat. That was how they first touched. The dog was licking their hands and confusing the issue. Still, there was a definite spark. Walking back toward the apartment, they traded the information that goes in dating profiles, with the feeling of belatedly completing the paperwork for something they'd already done under the table. Then, up in the elevator, where they were alone, and in which he suffered and wanted to kiss her, she smiled forward at the doors, unkissable, glowing with the idea of sex. They came out, and she unleashed the dog and slung the leash onto a branch of the coat rack. Without discussion, they headed to the balcony. There was someone already there, the rich girl's house guest, an older New Zealander whom Kate knew and who would later figure prominently in their lives. Ben didn't think much about him then. All he meant was that Ben wasn't alone with Kate. The New Zealander talked about a garden he was working on. He was a garden designer, in New York to create a rich person's garden. Ben listened to his accent and mainly considered him a useful pause, a device that would ease them more gently to the next stage. So it was the windy balcony, the lights of New York, another starscape. The actual stars were dull and few. From this perspective, the city was brighter and more complex than the cosmos. The cosmos, in fact, seemed rote, like a framed print hung on a wall solely because the wall would look wrong without pictures. There have to be pictures, and there has to be a cosmos, even if no one looks at them. And Ben looked at Kate surreptitiously, wishing he could tell her this, convinced that she would understand. She had a long nose and long black humorous eyes, a full red lipsticked mouth. Persian, his mind said besottedly. Persian. In heels, she was as tall as he was, full and rounded like a cat with a lot of fur. She stood uncannily straight, as if she'd never ever slouched, never hunched over work. She didn't even lean on the balcony's railing, but stood with her arms loose at her sides, weightless, a queenly bearing. Persian. Outside, she'd told him she was an artist, works on paper, who'd given up on her BFA at Pratt. She had suddenly not seen the point. If it were something like geology, maybe, she'd said, because he'd told her he had a degree in geology, although he was also a poet, published, he had hastily added. She'd volunteered in a helpful tone. Well, I read poetry, he'd said. Really?